Hello, welcome back. It's the 21st. Yeah, the 21st of January 2026. I'm having a few problems. I got it worked out, I think. My apologies. We're a couple minutes late. Yippee. Oh, we're 4 or 5 minutes late almost. Here we go anyway. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen, right? It does. Now, it came out, there's 500,000 or 750,000 truck or containers of radiation on the Canadian streets each year. It's over 2,000 a day. And these trucks are going to be releasing huge amounts of radiation to the passenger cars and the buses of people and everything else each day. Each minute, I'm sorry. And so then the poll today was, does 750,000 radioactive loads in the Canadian roads each year, which is irradiating millions of drivers. So a truck would interact with, say, 30 people. Would you give me that? Would you accept that a truck in Ontario, in particularly, bringing radiation from point A to point B is going to be passing or driving right alongside of or in proximity to at least 30 people? That's 30 million, or 30 people a day. So multiply it about 750,000. And getting close to the population of the country. Now, you know there's a lot more than that. And a lot of these are in Ontario, where most of the nuclear reactors are too. And so a truck would, now because of the emissions from this stuff. And if you remember a story, I'm going to bring it up in a little tiny bit. A couple of years ago, I covered a number of stories like this, but there was one in Australia which was really interesting, where one of their calibrating devices samples in order to calibrate the radiation detector equipment was lost on a highway in a 1,400 kilometer stretch or something of Australia's outback, and they estimated that anybody who was driving past this, it's the size of a pea, like a green pea you eat as a vegetable with your meal. It's much smaller than a dime, like a Canadian American dime, for instance, and that was equal to 19 billion decays a second, and it's cesium-137, so it can pulse energy 600 feet. But anyway, it was they had said that people that were driving on the highway at 70 miles per hour, which was the speed limit on that highway, were okay. They were getting a dose equal to about an X-ray or two. The people in the car, when they drove past the device that was only the size of a pea at 70 miles per hour. And I couldn't find that particular, and this was the industry acknowledging it, I couldn't find that particular one. But I did find the headlines about it and how they found it, and we're going to go through that, and that's in context with 750,000 beak loads, not the size of peas, but beak loads that are on the Canadian highways each year. Then how many is on the American roads? We know that, they're moving stuff from WIP or from Idaho National Laboratories or any of the national laboratories to WIP, which is the only repository that they have on the planet, despite the fact that it was a pilot project. It wasn't an actual repository. And people accepted that and got an application successfully passed to have the WIP's isolation WIP stands for Waste Isolation Pilot Project. Right, and they changed the last two words in that acronym and turned it into a repository. Like Fukushima turned Earth into a repository. Keith Richards got arrested for, allegedly, assault. And that'll come up in the second or third story. We'll talk about that for a little bit. Radioactivity from the plant was measured globally and blanketed the entire northern hemisphere. Significant amount of plutonium. We got a really good show. I didn't get a show on last night. I hurt my back on the truck. And it's been bothering me and getting worse. I'm doing okay today, but last night was just too much. I felt that. And the same thing the night before where I started aching sitting in this chair. And I made it through the show. In fact, the show was like 2 hours and 10 minutes, I think, the last show. It's just... Well, I got to talk about that for 1 second. Plutonium. And what you're looking at is a Neptunium-239 disposition radioactive fallout based on 20 days of radioactive fallout from Japan. Okay, and Neptunium-239, which is that model over there, decays to plutonium in every 2.5 days. 50% of that will decay. It'll do that 10 times, so 25 days. That model is based on 20 days of radioactive fallout post-Fukushima, and it's a very dishonest model. It doesn't include the actual inventories, the decades of reactor cores that were lost. So it's a very difficult story because you see this picture that was available on the 15th of March 2011, day 4. But this is what two of the reactors, for instance, 3 and 4, looked like in 2012, a year later. You won't see those two pictures anywhere else in that, like, joined together like that. And we're almost there. Well, you can't rush these types of videos, which I must have done something bad when I was young because I'm being punished for the rest of my life by having to constantly show the disinformation. That frightens me a lot. 144 beagle dogs. This was the United States Navy institution, research, Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So 144 beagle dogs. I'll get the audio right in a second. 144 beagle dogs. Tumors of the lungs, the skeleton, and liver occur beginning about 3 years after exposures. Bone tumors, 93 dogs were the most common cause of death to the 144 dogs. So 93, the biggest percentage of them died of bone tumors. So they were allowed to live out their life. They weren't given any anesthetics or any painkillers or anything like that, which is typical. And they killed just hundreds and hundreds of millions of dogs. And these in particular were the beagle dogs, which the scientists know they're not going to bite them, right? Bone tumors were found in 93 dogs. So how cruel you got to be to work in that industry. Lung tumors in 46 dogs were the second most common cause of death, and liver tumors in 20 dogs were the cause of death in only 2 of them, but occurred later than the tumors in the bones and the lungs, which was what eventually killed them. But if the dogs lived, long enough, they would have had 3 tumors from the plutonium. And the plutonium, as you know, covered the entire planet in 20 days. I just need to do this in order to appreciate Okay. So plutonium is not the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rod, according to the United States Navy. This was the same institution, Loveless, which is the appropriate name for those monsters, Respiratory Research Institute, New Mexico. Curium isotopes are a major byproduct in the irradiated nuclear fuel. So a fuel pool at the top of reactor buildings, forget the fact of alphas or betas or gammas or neutrons for a second. At the top of each of the buildings were 8 reactor cores. Give or take, not really, but there's probably more at the top of the building. So there's about 5.5 reactor cores moved to the top of the buildings each decade. And these were over 3 decades old. And they changed out the fuel at 1/3 of the fuel every 12 months, 14 months or something like that. And the older the reactor is, the quicker they're going to be changing it out. Now, the fuel, when it goes through a chain reaction, forever, you can take it out of the reactor the very next day, it's going to be splitting atoms for millions of years. So when you're originally putting it in there, you can actually pick it up with your hands. But once it goes through a chain reaction, it'll melt your organs in just a few seconds in that same proximity. All right. Back, curium isotopes are the major byproduct. So not cesium, not iodine, not uranium, plutonium, or americium, or neptunium, or 1,000 other fission products, which attack everything with replicating cells. So you're not safe from any of them. But curium isotopes are the major byproduct. It turned out that curium, one of the biggest byproducts is around 20 times thick. You need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Plutonium killed all the dogs. And the biggest byproduct of the fuel rods. So the plume is, you should be thinking about curium isotopes first and foremost. Now, cesium, for instance, pulses energy 600 feet every second for 300 years. This pulses energy much harder, harsher. So the fallout broke the food chain. So this blue whale should weigh, which weighs at best, say, 50,000 pounds because it's 100 feet long. And you got bones and you got skin, but there's no muscle, there's no fat, there's no blubber. It's totally gone in all of these species. That prize whale was about a week ago. But you also had other isotopes in that same plume. This was the xenon 133. Let me just... So think about this plume up here. That's the Neptunian plume. I actually spun it sideways so I can fit it in that picture with that headline so that it would actually, I can get it all on your screen. Fukushima radioactive material, a significant amount of plutonium. Well, it was much more significant. And they used to say a couple of kilograms of plutonium was capable released into the environment. Now, there's no other emissions that will make a plume that looks like that symmetrically covers the planet. That model, the numbers they're using is not the inventories that were lost. It was just a fraction of these inventories. So the loss of 18 reactor cores in just these 2 buildings, remember there's 4 of them, they all lost their entire inventories over 30 years of the fuel. And there's no species on the planet has an autoimmune trigger that can defend against the fuel, the atoms, anthropogenic man-made atoms. Like they know everything there is to know about this stuff, by the way. I'm not guessing none of this. This is well-known information, how this works. I'll back that up in a second, even better for you. How low doses of radiation, now it's not just cancer, because a lot of people gets confused and they think only, which is bad enough to think of cancer, but you got to realize these plumes create an explosion of heart and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, all your friends and loved ones. Ask your hairdresser has already seen an increase in autism or diabetes or Down syndrome or schizophrenia or dementia. And they'll say, well, girl, we were just talking about that. This will make sense as we go through the madness of each of these presentations. This is madness. Every show I do, it's madness. It's unbelievable. It's like it's so necessary, and I feel so fortunate that I could do the things I'm doing. I'm just so grateful for every one of these shows. It's hard to comprehend that statement, appreciate the enormity of that actual statement that I'm making there. And I've made it many times over the years, for many, many years. I've been at this a long time. Okay, let me just quantify what I set up to now, because the study on the dogs kind of help you appreciate what I'm saying, right? Now, the industry won't provide the documentations for their assertions, and the burden is on me to provide it because I'm not from Harvard or Yale or Stanford or Oxford or MIT or any of the major shakers and movers. I'm actually I studied all of them, though. I was fortunate enough to catch all of their... It says I'm not... no internet. Am I streaming? I'm just going to check the comments to see if anybody's yelling at me. Okay, well, let me bring up radiation studies. Just so you can appreciate what these crazies actually know. Oh, I know. Let's look at animal studies. Just let me flick through super fast so you can comprehend a bit better. Colette says I'm streaming fine. Okay, that's cool. We're right there. I'll do this again. Now, I've been doing this 5 days a week for how long? Live on YouTube, for instance, over a decade. The actual live streams. I got 11 viewers and 9 likes and 11 votes. Nobody cares about this now. If I was rapping shit on a stick, there'd be 30,000 people that are yucking it up, right? But the industry wants you to assume that wants you to feel that nobody's watching your show and that will discourage you from talking about it roughly, right? So when I show you, I'm just going to flash through these studies, but I want you to appreciate that the industry has actually studied anthropogenic man-made radiation more than the natural elements from the solar system. Anthropogenic man-made radiation is not created by the solar system. Now I got 9 people on my show. A novel pilot study of automated identification. Just let me flash through these. So they studied every facet. They know everything about radiation, its effects on people and birds and mammals and animals. And it's hard, if you've never been here before, to appreciate what I'm saying to you. But I've showed at least 60,000 studies on this site doing these types of presentations, and that I still have gathered up, right? In order to hopefully instill upon those that are trying to absorb this information and the enormity of this equation, that they actually know everything about it. There's nothing they don't actually know about it. They studied every facet of it, and it was meant to justify the nuclear industry, and a lot of it was meant to misrepresent the toxicity of this material, which is acknowledged by the U.S. government. The EPA says it's 2 billion times. So an anthropogenic man-made isotope is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And so the blue, when you see the blue, that's the people that are doing the studies, and they got to pay mortgages for their big, beautiful houses, and Their children has to take piano and violin and all kinds of sports lessons. They got to go to private schools and everything else. So there's an enormous amount of money spent each year on these types of studies. The biggest amount of the 4.3 million studies produced each year are about anthropogenic man-made radiation. And that's possible because they contaminated everything on the planet, every rock, every tree, every bird's nest, every larvae has been contaminated by anthropogenic man-made radiation. Now, the Morals Night show is about the die-offs. We got unfortunately, another die-off video ready to go. And a lot of these studies are meant to downplay this. Like 20 sieverts, that will actually melt your organs in an environment. But yet they're claiming 1 gray was equal to 20 sieverts and that a couple of grays was survivable. A lot of these studies are meant to protect the industry by saying it's harmless or innocuous or benign. It's simply not true. But what I want you to understand is that they've studied every facet of it in order to weaponize it against you, to find weaknesses in the human DNA and chromosomes and cells and everything else, and then be able to utilize that as an extinction machine. Okay, let me go back here. How low doses of radiation causes heart diseases and strokes. So because you got gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, and like plutonium's an alpha, depending on, it could be a beta too, right? Depending on which isotope of plutonium we're talking about. And same thing with, say, cesium could be a gamma, it could be a beta, could be a neutron, depending on its source of emissions and its isotope. And what you're talking about is the thyroid gland is, of all developing species in young kids right now, is producing anthropogenic man-made hormones and anthropogenic man-made stem cells. And so the developing species have a little hope of maturing without congenital malformations or illnesses or diseases or autoimmune deficiencies or injuries or lifelong catastrophic health consequences. And this goes not only from the microscopic biota in your forest that breaks down the foliage and the litter and everything else, all the way up to the elephants and whales. Nothing is sacred, nothing is safe from anthropogenic man-made radiation fallout. So nuclear waste being processed during the explosion in France in 2011, they were packaging it for storage at 17 atoms a kilogram. But the food they're feeding people, they say, is minimum of 100 atoms or 100 atoms per kilogram. The whales we're seeing, like this killer whale here from Belgium, there's quite a few killer whales showing up. All the whales are actually showing up in this severe emaciation state because there's still food in the ocean. The fish are still out there. They're still fishing commercially, right? But because they bioaccumulated so much radiation, they can't uptake nutrition anymore, like a leukemia victim. And leukemia victims is a direct result of radiation contamination from disposition from, say, 1,000 fuel pools. We have 1,000 fuel pools worldwide that are splitting atoms directly into the environment all day. And that environment is surrounded by farms, as far as you can see. Almost every nuclear power plant, every nuclear dump, every nuclear processing, reprocessing facilities are surrounded by farms. And we're talking epic. If you look at it from a satellite, it's still all you will see in the background. That certainly can't be a coincidence or an accident. Now, the whales are diving, but the killer whales will feed on over 200 species. Halibut or octopus or birds or seals or walruses or whatever. It's capable of snacking down on whatever feels like it. So there's still species out there, so there's no reason you should see severe emaciation, which was showing up within a couple of years. A failure of breeding was also showing up, which was emblematic of radioactive stem cells and radioactive hormones being produced. at such a prolific rate. Now, the human body's not designed to run on that. Nobody is safe from this stuff. No matter how wealthy, how poor, how privileged, or language, or ideology, or anything else. Thyroid cancer risks last an entire life after radiation exposure, and leukemia risk peaks in a few years. Any kind of radiation exposure is forever. If it's in your body, it's pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second, and it's wrecking your chromosomes, your cells, your DNA, and everything else. And then your body tries to repair that with white blood cells, but it can't keep up with it. So when you look at these numbers here, these are catastrophic numbers. This was a study out of Ottawa, Canada. Now, for every iodine-131, there's 10 times more iodine-132 produced. And for every iodine-131, there's 30 times more iodine-133 produced. The iodine-132 and 133 are 9 times more effective. The incredibly effective iodine-131 is at producing radioactive hormones, for instance. For every iodine-131 produced, there's 31 times more iodine-129. Iodine-129, of course, has a 15 million year half-life. And because it's so prolific, you have no species, no birds, no mammals, animals, no species have any hope of not producing radioactive hormones because of these multiple barriers. So you can see the rib cages, you can see the spinal column, you can see the shoulder blades, you see the peanut head. This is severe emaciation. And because they're big animals, they have big, long bones for their whole body, right, as cartilage and bones. Then, now I've dove under bones before of whales in front of whale factories from the old days, right, where some whales didn't get processed because, back in them days they were greedy. In summertime, the whale could go bad pretty big, and right, so the whale would sink. And I've spent days and days, tank after tank after tank after tank, on their skeleton. Say at 100 feet, for instance, you're not going to spend that much time. But I've dove on those too, where you have complete carcasses, and you're looking for like the killer whales. Whenever I know of a killer whale sinking in an area, I'll go there and look for the eardrums because they're pure ivory, for instance. So we're talking about a long time ago now, but inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer. So it's in your body. Your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. The white blood cells are displacing red blood cells. Red blood cells carry oxygen nutrition. And eventually white blood cells will build a sarcophagus around the anthropogenic man-made object because it doesn't recognize it's not from the solar system. It doesn't have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So its defense is to build a tumor around it. That's what it eventually gets diagnosed when it manifests as a tumor, which can become catastrophic, right? But we're seeing that in all the species, which we've never heard of pre-Fukushima. This picture, these are all recent whales, and all of these we're going to be covering tomorrow night, by the way, in my die-off, right? So all of these will be in my die-offs presentation that hopefully I'm going to do tomorrow night. As long as my back doesn't give out on me. And so the blue whale on top corner should weigh 380,000 pounds. It probably weighs 22,000 pounds only because the skeleton and the skin would weigh that much. There is no muscle, there's no fat, there's no blubber on that whale. That's missing at least, let's say it weighs 50,000 pounds, the one up in the top right-hand corner. It should weigh an extra 350,000 pounds, roughly. Well, it should weigh total, 380,000. So it should weigh 330,000 pounds. 330,000. Say 300,000 pounds. Well, you look at the people up there, you can compare them to the width of the whale, for instance, right? Clearly, it has no blubber, no fat. Now, this prize whale from a couple of months ago, which is maybe 1,800 pounds, And that was the only picture that came out of India of it. There was multiple pictures. That was the same picture. Very low quality. That made it to the North America media. It was probably high quality in India's media, but by the time the censorship got through censoring it, we only got a grainy picture. That normally weighs almost 90,000 pounds. Now it's weighing 18,000 because there's nothing there. It's a sperm whale, maybe 15 tons when it should weigh 45 tons. And I'm not even sure what whale this is. It's surreal. That is a surreal, it's like a snake, right? It's just surreal to see something like that. The gray whale, these whales, all whales will be gone in the next few years. And so they're either got to have an event that will distract people from being rightfully concerned, or they're just going to exclude it from the narratives, which I don't know how that's going to work. And so just as a single particle is in anybody's body, any species' body, it becomes a catastrophic problem for their health because it's pulsing energy, right? And so the white blood cells you produce to attack it every second of your life for the rest of your life for the species is displacing the red blood cell. The red blood cell carries oxygen and nutrition. So after Japan, he said the deaths is up 48% since radiation levels spiked in tap water. Deaths are up 40% since they spiked. Now, the reason they talk about iodine, which is not the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rod, as I showed you earlier, which is curium. Curium, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Plutonium kills all the animals and all the different sizes of animals with multiple tumors. It's because the media is reporting on it, but they're not being honest. They're not going to mention, like, iodines and cesium is typically what the majority of the population has. If they're paying any attention, that's their references, but they still don't understand. This is another bronze whale, about 3 months after this one. But this one is very high quality and is not quite as severe as this. Like, in order for this whale to be on the beach, it's because it was alive, right? It was alive, and that's how it ended up on the beach. That's what they claimed, it was alive when it came on the beach. But a whale like this doesn't have the ability to float on its own. So it would have sank. It wouldn't have washed up. And if it did wash up, because it's in such a fragile state, right, it would have been torn apart by those motions. So clearly this came up alive. And same thing, this one is confirmed to come ashore when it was alive. There was 26 killer whales recently died. The biggest event of the die-off in Argentina is where it happened. But it's the biggest mass die-off of killer whales in history. And we only had 6 stories, and there were 16 of them showed up. But there was 2 found originally, but they never found the rest of them for another 24 days. And so the first 2 were considered part of the 26. Now, we did have high-quality pictures of the first 2. They were, you can see the peanut head, you can see the shoulder blades, you can see the rib cage. You didn't have many pictures. In fact, we never had 16 pictures of 16 whales, which is what you would expect. If you're going to go there and take a picture, wouldn't you take pictures of all 16 whales? And isn't that interesting to have, right? Wouldn't that bring in the viewers? Well, see, this picture here, the average person will look at that and they'll say, well, it doesn't look healthy, but they won't appreciate the fact that they have no muscles, let alone blubber or fat. That there's nothing there, any skin and bones. So a BQ is a pulse of energy from an anthropogenic man-made isotope, right? That is described as an atom with extra neutrons or protons or whatever. But it's anthropogenic man-made isotope is the best way. And we just call it an anthropogenic man-made atom, and there's 1,000 different types of it, and every one of them will attack your body will attack it with white blood cells for the rest of your life if you breathe it or drink it or consume it or you shower washing it and you are. All right, we're almost there. And I know this stuff is very confusing. We don't report on the health risks from radiation because people might worry. Well, then how can they can't worry if they don't know how bad it is, see? And radiation health specialists, children with 11 atoms a kilogram start to see heart problems. But what I appreciated of that is 50 atoms a kilogram, you have permanent, it'll put holes in their hearts, permanent damage to their hearts. And for adults with 50 atoms a kilogram, a becquerel is the pulse of energy, and you need an isotope, an atom, to do that. So when you see 11, assume there's 11 atoms there. That's why I say it that way, in order to try to get anybody and everybody to be able to articulate why this is bad. Because if you get too technical, it makes it harder. But you still got to do it, but it makes it harder for the newest people to your presentations and shows, whatever you want to call these things, these nightmares. These things, what I do, are nightmares. It's just heartbreaking. All right, here we go. We made it. It's not bad, 36 minutes. And I'm behind schedule. I was 4 minutes behind schedule, but it looks of it. What happened was I had to restart my system. I was having problems. I had a lot of flickering, right? And the only way I can dial that back is I have to, the routine. Just give me 1 second there. Alrighty. Blah, 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 blah. How a tiny radioactive capsule was found in Australia's vast outback. So remember I talked about cesium-137 pulses energy for 600 feet every second, each atom. So if you're within 600 feet of an anthropogenic man-made isotope like cesium, you will, and you got the right type of Geiger counter, you know how to use it, and it hasn't been used in a heavily radiated area, and that is because that could make it inoperable, right, or unreliable. You have to send it back to the manufacturer, which I don't even know how that works, because if you radiate your Geiger counter, how do you expect your Geiger counter to work? Like you can't find any steel on the planet that's not irradiated. So when you check in for radiation failure, stay away from steel. Is to take away from that. So you get you can get lead bricks from a dive shop, for instance, or you can go to a auto repair place and get all the brake weights. But you got to worry about, because the stuff that's from the brake dust itself, you're going to be getting that on your fingers, and you don't want to get injustice. So spend $100 at the dive shop, get yourself some lead weights, and build a little container of lead weights and put your Geiger counter in there with your sample. And if you got one like my, and I forgot to get the battery for my Geiger counter, because we usually got a Geiger counter up in the top corner, top right-hand corner. How a tiny let me shut up and get on with it. How a tiny radioactive capsule was found in Australia's vast outback, Dana. One of them, the uranium mining companies, reported one of their cesium. When they say it with an A, that's a British terminology. And all the media was doing that, particularly the British media, or the Australian media. Now, Australia doesn't typically describe cesium as cesium. When you see the CA, that's emblematic. This is a British, very heavily influenced story. 137 radioactive capsule has gone missing. Western Australia authorities face a seemingly impossible task to find it. And just let me run through it. They had to locate a pea size, so it's the size of a green pea, right? Very tiny. And there's some depictions. It was 1,400 kilometers, not 1,200, Dana. Sorry, I'm doing the best I can. 870-mile route stretching from blah, 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 blah to blah, 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 blah. And you got to realize the British irradiated that country, so it's very difficult to find radiation, a separate source, because everything is still irradiated, right, from the British, went all the way to Australia just to irradiate Australia, their water, and their farms and land. They actually had like 30 planes in the sky for each test, and they knew exactly where the radioactive fallout was going to go. So it couldn't have been an accident, right, that they irradiate the entire country. They actually set off over 700 dirty bombs. They took plutonium, americium, neptunium, stuff like that, which decays quickly to plutonium, by the way, and wrapped it up with conventional explosives, dirty bombs, and detonated 700 dirty bombs in the country, which huge, vast tracts of that country. And then Marilinga, Montebello, I can't remember which island group of those tropical islands, they destroyed all the tropical paradises on Earth with nuclear weapons, right? Which was bizarre. Right? A tropical paradise is truly, we actually had them on our planet, right? The French Polynesians, Marilinga, Christmas Islands, Marshall Islands. These were all tropical they still are, but they're nuclear wastelands. Over 1 million square kilometers of the Marshall Islands is still uninhabitable. Just one of the weapons they set off out there was equal to over 1,000 Nagasaki. I say Nagasaki because Nagasaki was the plutonium bomb. Hiroshima was a uranium. Actually, Hiroshima was the only uranium bomb we ever used. Idiots. Like nuclear weapons was a nuclear war. It's the same radioactive fallout. You don't need a nuclear war to have radioactive fallout. We already done it. The Soviet Union's biggest bomb was equal to around 5,000 Nagasaki bombs going off at one time in radioactive fallout. And there's numbers now suggesting it was actually bigger than the 50 megatons, which makes it even worse. It could be 6,000 Nagasaki bombs at the one time. At the conventional 15, 20 kilotons, right? If you come into contact with one, it can cause severe burns, exposure equivalent of 10 X-rays per hour. Every time you hear these kind of words, you got to take in context of how sadistic this industry actually is and how low-key they're actually playing it. Just driving past it on the highway, the estimate was it was equal to an X-ray. So if you drove past this little pea in a container, special container, that was found intact on the side of the road, within 2 meters of the road, you got everybody in your car, your wife, your family, your friends, your husband, your kids, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, whoever was in the car with you, got an X-ray. And if they're pregnant, that's enough to almost guarantee the child won't graduate high school. Before notifying the public, the slaves, they began searching, but they didn't tell people. On the 27th of January, an urgent health warning was issued to notify the public about the risk posed by the radioactive capsule. And the only reason they're doing stuff like that is there's been a few examples throughout history where radiation equipment or radiation material in one case was actually unpurposely put into a wall of an apartment building, and then they studied the victims, and there was like one family lost 5 members because they were next to the wall in the hallway that had a radioactive cesium-137 capsule, but they had all died from radiation poisoning, and that gave the nuclear industry a really black eye. And so they learn right to protect themselves, not you. And so they made extraordinary acknowledgement that they had lost. Now they also acknowledge they've lost quite a few of these over the years. And it's not just Australia. Stay away from it if you find it. Like you tell me something the size of the pea on almost a 900-mile, 1,400 kilometer stretch of road that there's no reason for you to stop there. There's no reason for you to say, oh, that's pretty. And the way let me go through it. A simple message anyone may come across is stay away. It's both beta rays and gamma rays. So if you have it closer, you could either end up with skin damage, including skin burns. No, you end up with an autoimmune. Your immune system becomes compromised, so you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. By 27th of January, search parties were in full force, and most of these people have no concept of how dangerous this that environment they're going into is going to be. But they were not scouting for it using their eyes. They were using portable radiation survey meters, Geiger counters. And because Australia meters is disgusting, people. Radiation portal monitors detect gamma radiation, typically used at airports to scan individuals to ensure they do not have radioactive substances on them. Because the industry is frightened to death that you're going to get radiation, put it somewhere where they hang out and destroy them. But I used to joke around, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, years ago in some of these shows, and I would say, you know, I might start, because you can order food from the nuclear wasteland, I might start ordering rice from the nuclear wasteland and open up a little vending machine in front of Harvard University, Yale University, where the students, the university students from these institutions can get dirt cheap rice, radioactive rice. So they come out, instead of going to the local restaurants and paying $100 or $50, they can buy all they can eat for like $3 from my stall out in front of their university, and I only sell it to students from Harvard University or faculty members. If I was young, I'd be doing it. I know it sounds crazy, but they do. That's what they're doing to you. They'll get an education, go out and figure out how they can poison you with the same food. Radiation poor, and so they're anybody that's carrying a dose that they're concerned about is getting a lethal dose on top of that. Okay, just little tidbits coming up. Detection equipment can be attached to vehicles, so search can be done for moving vehicles at about 50 kilometers. We're doing it at 70 miles per hour, not kilometers. A surprising large number, and they're imperial numbers, not metric, so why are they using metric numbers in Australia, for goodness sakes? A surprising, they're trying to downplay it, right? A surprising large number of these sources that get lost or never get found. A surprising large number of these sources apparently get lost. So you're talking about a gigabecal. There's 19 gigabecquerels. Should have been right there, actually. An earlier version said this article was amended on 29th of January, 2023. So an earlier version of this radiation source was 19 becquerels, atoms, which is 19 gigabecquerels, and a gigabecquerel is a billion. So 19 billion pulses of energy each second from that source. And so that's a dime, I guess. Or that's Australian dime, which is, I'm assuming it's the same as the American and Canadian dime, very small. And then that's the size of it, over 6 millimeters. It's the size of a pea. That's like a green pea that you would eat with your caviar, if you're pro-nuclear. How dangerous is the capsule? It emits radiation equivalent to 10 X-rays per hour. It's way worse than that. It emits like 600 feet on top of that. But anyway, one of the candid moments came from an official from the nuclear industry, the government industry, the nuclear industry in Australia, said that driving past it, it's at full speed, which is 70 miles per hour, not 50 kilometers an hour, is equivalent to an X-ray dose, which is absurd. That's an absurd dose, by the way. So how could that be safe in the equipment, see? How could that be safe in the back of a truck from the people inside the truck? The reason it's on the back of the truck because it wasn't safe to bring in the truck in the first place. The industry is that we got so many examples of this kind of routine where they're completely dishonest and the harm is very real. So when I was driving down the road, everybody on the highway that drives with them, they say it was safe. It was in this machine, which is not a lead case, by the way. So it's in this machine and it's on the back of a truck. Well, everybody that passes you on the highway is getting a brutal radioactive dose. And we're going to get to that in a minute. Just driving past it is believed to be of relatively low risk. Just driving past it. Well, we know it was within 2 meters of the road. So CNN puts out a picture of all these bananas. And when you conflate natural stuff with man-made stuff in order to downplay it, you're the worst. You're just a revolting parasite. You're a monster. You should get 10 years in jail for just writing an article and misinforming the population. Like, in order to do it, and if you're a journalist, you know the difference. I was infuriated when I seen this picture. I was infuriated. I was indignant that. So he said they're going to put up 20 meters, 60-foot exclusion zone around the capsule, and then a lead container before it's being taken to a security facility. So how are you going to get within 60 feet to pick it up? To put it in the container there? How does that work? And this story was in the middle. New radioactive injection treated arthritis in dogs. It's absurd to suggest that actually works that way. It's hideous to do that to animals. That's just evil. Right? That's a level of evil that most people can't even wrap their mind around. If you put radioactive material in an animal or a human, which is how they claim they treat you for cancer, that's murder. That's what that actually is. If I take the same radioactive material and contaminate your food source, I'm a terrorist. If they take it and actually put it in your physical body, they're the first responders, the heroes. Don't you believe that? And it's a new radioactive injection. After 80 years, they have never been able to quantify using radiation as a solution. Why would it be a solution? How could it be a solution? Your body's response is to attack it with white blood cells for the rest of your life and build a tumor around it. And right, that tumor eventually will metastasize and show up everywhere else. It's like using radiation on people in the hospital is a genocide. All day, every minute of every day. Standing 1 meter from the capsule for 1 hour, and I love these when they tell these blatant lies, would be equivalent of receiving 10 X-rays. You're like the X-ray, the gamma shine coming from this. Every second, you got 19 billion pulses going through your body. And so that can destroy 19 billion DNA and chromosomes and cells every second. Your body will try to repair every one of them each second with more white blood cells. And so every pulse of energy, you're producing a massive amount of more white blood cells to try to repair the damage, which you can't keep up with. So, like, it's not just your spleen that's producing white blood cells, it's every joint on your body. And then in the comment section, if something like that fell into the wrong hands, the next guy goes, looks like it already has. It should never be used in the civilian applications or military applications or in a hospital or anything else. It shouldn't exist. We don't have the technology to repair the damage, neither does your body, neither does any species. Not a single species on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against these gamma shines, neutron bombardments, these beta rays, these alpha shines, these X-rays. And because, and they were saying in one of these stories that it was gamma and beta. Like cesium can be both, right? When it decays, its next isotope. And the problem with that is you're producing an X-ray also, or a Bremsstrahlung effect, which is was discovered by a German physicist, that gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, which are almost at the speed of light, right? So we don't have any technology that can go at the speed of light, almost the speed of light, except for anthropogenic man-made isotopes. They pulse energy almost at the speed of light. It's so powerful and so harmful to everything with replicating cells. It's hard to explain for some reason for the average person to appreciate how dangerous this stuff is. But what happens is you got gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, radioactive fallout. Think about it that way. Each one of those isotopes are pulsing energy almost at the speed of light, and they'll crash into each other and they'll change direction. That's known as a braking effect. And that braking effect creates an X-ray, that clap almost at the speed of light. So almost at the speed of light, almost at the speed of light. When they hit each other, that combination, that crash, creates what we call, in North America, for instance, an X-ray. And so all the species in that environment are getting full-body X-rays. On top of the gammas and shine, the neutron bombardment, the beta ray, the alpha shine. Right? None of these, we don't have an autoimmune trigger to defend against. So it's an elixir of evil. Now our entire biosphere and ecosystem is saturated with gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas. So no matter where you are, you're getting full-body X-rays. No matter what part of the forest or meadows you look at, the biota, the microscopic animals, the insects, the birds, the newborn are all getting, the worms, anything, they're all getting full-body X-rays and, gammas, alphas, neutrons, and beta shines and bombardments and everything else. Each year, CNS and Traffic and Database records 150 or so such incidences around the world each year. Now in Canada, we're going to get to the story right away in 3 more clicks or something. It's unbelievable, that story we're about to touch upon. The source has an activity of 19 billion atoms pulsing energy every second, which means 19 billion high energy protons per second. High energy protons per second. High energy protons per second. So that can destroy 19 billion cells, 19 billion chromosomes, 19 billion DNAs every second to every species in proximity. Oh, it was eventually detected. It says 70 kilometers. Maybe I was wrong. But Australia is not. I thought Australia was imperial, not metric. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just an idiot. It was detected by a search vehicle traveling at 70 kilometers per hour when specialist equipment picked up radiation emitting from the capsule. 2 meters, 6 feet from the side of the road. All right. So we're talking about something the size of a pea. How about something the size of a suitcase in the back of a truck? OPP confirms nuclear material was involved in a highway crash near Lansdowne, Ontario, Canada. And here's what you need to know. The minute you hear stuff like that, you need to be worried, because they're going to lie to you, right? So you see the truck, and some of these pictures I'll get to them coming up here. Let me check a few more pictures. I actually highlighted some of these pictures. There you go. Let me bring that back up. So, you see the gap in the yellow is between the 2 trucks, is what I was trying to point out. The 2 red rectangles are the canisters, or the so-called. Now, typically, they're held at ground level, right? So there's a hole in the ground because they're emitting so much radiation. So you can see that truck. Now, the interior of that cab of that truck is going to be radiated forever. And because if you put 2 of them on the back of in the same area at proximity to each other, it's a much stronger dose for everybody on the highway. And so they have a big gap in the middle. That's on purpose, that whole design. These are special designs. A major winter storm led to a series of multi-vehicle collisions on Highway 40. And the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission shared that each year, about 750,000 shipments containing, and they're all bigger than a pea, folks, containing radioactive material are transported, and you can't quantify safely because you're radiating everybody in the vehicles on the highways and the driver and their cars and the trucks and everything else. So even the cars are being irradiated. So if it gets into a traffic jam, what kind of dose are the people within 600 feet of this genocide machine? I wonder, each of these genocide machines. According to federal regulators, there's been no report of serious radiological or not reported, but you know the damage is happening because you have the material in proximity to humans. So it has to be hurting humans. And then everything on the side of the road is being irradiated when it's driving. And those cars, if they're used for scrap, there could be neutron sources there, which will irradiate your vehicles and your highways and your guardrails and everything else. And the people on the highway that are passing you or driving proximity to you. And these highways are like 3 or 4 lanes wide. So you have an even more likelihood of massive amount of victims. So you're talking about irradiating the majority of the population each year, and they're not aware this is happening. They didn't consent to any of this. It's surreal. It's surreal that this is happening. A major winter storm led to a series of collisions. And so did they really think that these vehicles weren't going to get in collision? They know they are. But 750 shipments, 750,000 vehicles. Each vehicle is going to contaminate, most likely, thousands of cars in their route, if not more. Like they're getting multiple x-rays for every vehicle. Like that is such an absurd statement. That is a horrifying statement. We know what a pea size of this material will do in a canister. How many times has this happened that they don't tell you because they're under the secrecy law? They don't have to tell you. That law has been in existence since the Manhattan Project. And they most likely have a security that is following this stuff. Not that it's necessary, not that anybody can steal it and survive it or utilize it or weaponize it or anything else, because you can't open these canisters without getting a lethal dose. And these canisters, like for WIP, all transportation from, say, Los Alamos National Laboratory or other institutions are vented. And so it's highly likely that these canisters are vented, that they're splitting atoms into that environment. And so the older the industry is, the more waste it has, the more atoms are being produced every single day. La 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 baby. Oh, I never started off with a song tonight, did I? I got lost. I needed a break. We just went straight at it, didn't we? I'm going to give my throat a little break, and we're going to... Because music lights up 19% of your brain that you don't use. So that's a pretty cool thing. And then I'm going to play something a little more laid back. Just go clear my throat here. Get a little bit more water, and I'll be right back after that. It's called Yellow Cake Mule. Just bear with me. We're at an hour, 4 minutes into the show already. I love this song, by the way. Yellow Cake Mule. I'm just going to put a link in the description for you. Anything you sterilize with radiation is poison and is capable of causing great harm to everybody. So I put a link in there for that song for everybody. I'll be right back after that song, which is right here. Right there. It's only 3 minutes long. It's a wonderful song. You're going to love it. If I don't screw it up, no audio. Oh, I did. I turned it on. Make sure I'm in 1080. And that story, conveniently, is about radioactive waste on the highway. What a coincidence, Dana. I know, right? Link is in the description. You like the song. Download it and give it to your kids. I'll be right back in 3 minutes and 20 seconds.
Outside Tucumcari, rental truck, paint strip, tires close to failing. Driver says it's a moving job. It's clearly not. One-day contract to cross the state line, that's draws. No household goods inside. Drums stacked to the ceiling. Plastic torn, heavy powder exposed. Yellow cake baby, yellow cake mule. Interstate haul, not cocaine, not meth, not street contraband. Powder for the core, driven in daylight, truck rolls west. Nothing stops it. Barrels left in rows, 1,000 tons in storage, fence pulled down. Inspectors went in, counted drum by drum, 10 were missing. 5 were found outside, abandoned in the open, left without a guard. Not contraband, wages measured in uranium, loaded at night. Routes not reported, hidden hand. Fuel cycle sustains. AI looks away. Police say nothing. Wrong kind of crime. Freight moves west. Looks like moving day. Yellow cake mule. Interstate haul. Not cocaine.
750,000 a year of these things just in Canada. My goodness.
Nothing stops it. Truck keeps moving. Highway takes it in. No mercy, no break. Only yellow cake mule. Yellow cake mule. Yellow cake mule.
750,000 of these things out there radiating everything and everyone every day. There's 2,000 here in Canada, which means how many is in the United States every day doing this disgusting thing to us? It's currently minus 22. My window. It's It's windy, cold. Winter really showed up. Missing radioactive capsule found on a remote road, traveling at 70 kilometers an hour. They got it on the Geiger counter 2 meters from the road. So what's it going to be like when you're in traffic on these highways or any road and you drive past these things, you're getting a blast. And it's leaving permanent damage because the majority of these are vented. Let me just see if I can find that. I'm pretty lucky sometimes. Actually, just bear with me. There we go. Everything is vented. Vented. That whip, my goodness, how much crap do I have? Gotta go back here. Not crap, it's everything is vented. That one won't work. Let me see if I can find another one. We'll get her. As we always do. So one is 7 megabytes and one is 3 megabytes. So one of them works. So let me post both of them. Oh, this one. Now I'm notorious for screwing up the volume, but I'll start off low and I'll restart it if I got to.
Are you still getting such waste that's not vented?
That's the video does the bad recording. Typically, right? Are you still getting waste? Now, this was a seeded question. These people know each other or they work for the same company. Are you still getting waste that's not vented or vented? Let me play that one more time.
Are you still getting such waste that's not vented?
That's not, are you still getting? But everything that comes to WIP is vented because you can't repackage it, right?
And that could be a problem.
Okay, so that's a great question. So let me answer it more generally. There are no containers at WIP that are unvented.
There's no containers at WIP that are unvented. Everything is vented. So, which means, and the reason it's vented is because it builds up hydrogen, and if you displace the oxygen, the hydrogen, when it's introduced oxygen back in there, or a spark will detonate. Or just oxygen will make the hydrogen detonate. And so everything they're shipping, which is the legacy waste from the nuclear era, the nuclear weapons era, which is just horrific stuff, say from Los Alamos National Laboratory, which is certainly not the only place that is shipping it there, But the majority of the waste that is going to this pilot project, which was supposed to be an experiment to see how it would hold up in salt. Now, typically when you put different metals and salts in the same environment, they denigrate, material will denigrate quite quickly. So these are all vented. Now, I highlighted that to remind me, I didn't mean to show it, but I highlighted that to remind me to mention that that area of the deck is permanently radiated. So if these trailers are carrying anything else, you're going to irradiate those trailers, everything you put on that trailer. So say it's brand new trailers. They only do this once. And after that, they're carrying baby items or they're carrying whatever, stuff for Canadian Tire, Walmart, whatever. All that stuff becomes irradiated because you radiated the material. And typically those types of canisters employing fuel. Is implying that fuel was used, right? Yeah, I was trying to key out everything in the background, but so that truck. The idea of this was, before I didn't forget to mention that truck now was permanently irradiated because it's in such close proximity, and so are the drivers. So are the drivers. There have been no reported serious, but there's been some radiological in. Of course, there's serious. Any kind of radiological contamination is serious. Or environmental consequences attributed to the radioactive nature of the material. Well, how could there not be? This stuff attacks everything with replicating cells. There's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. Missing radioactive capsule found on a remote road in Australia. Traveling at 70 kilometers an hour, the size of a pea was detected 2 meters from the road. How easy would it be to pick up those canisters on the side of the road with the same equipment? It'd be absurdly easy, see? Stuff like this, that's why we get the big numbers. That's why we have thousands and thousands of people currently, 16 people watching our videos. I accept that I'm going to be censored, but the industry better accept that eventually we'll be coming for them. And the people that are censoring me are leaving a digital record. Eventually we're going to find out who you are, and your family will know what you've done. 2025 continues the hottest streak of hottest years ever recorded. So, World Economic Forum. Before I jump into this story, let's talk about, because we got Kiefer Sutherland for the next story. We got to do that story before that, which is only 3 clicks or something. But let me talk about the World Economic Forum for a minute, hopefully. Oh, it's not over there, Danny, you dummy. It's on your desktop, boy. What's wrong with you? Oh, they lost their minds, have they? Were you getting that on your side, folks? I was getting major disruption on my side.
My God, what a problem!
So, this is Rebel News. This was at the World Economic Forum. Excuse me 1 second here. It's the World Economic Forum. I just wanted to check and see if just a blip. Got a bit scrambled, said Richard. Just a blip. Hi, Dana. Davos was evacuated, was it? I missed that. Just let me see if I can find it. Because that's a big scoop right there if we can find. Yeah, there it is. I was just wondering what I figured out, but obviously I'll bring it up for you. Davos fire reported why Congress Center was evacuated today. Congress Center. As firefighters rushed to the scene following Donald Trump's bombshell trade threat U-turn. They said there was a fire at the center. Uh, 5 hours ago. Just let me see most recent reports. Not that they're going to give us any just it's just freaking. Just let me bring up another scumbag Bing. Bing. It usually gives you Bing search. There it is. Not doing it. You know what I'm talking about? Because that's not Bing, right? That's whatever. Search engine. Done it again. Look, it didn't bring up the competitors' links. Freaking pain in the ass. It's okay. Let me go the other route here. Bing, bing, bing. Man, I've never seen my computer done that when I said, let's go look at the World Economic Forum. My computer lost his mind. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, I need it up here. I just want to get the last hour, right? There you go. Cough-inducing strange order. Fire breaks out. Fire 23 minutes ago. Fondue shack near the hotel also caught fire. Fondue shack. Well, Trump, we know the Americans just defunded 66, which is pretty appropriate. 66 United Nations subsidiary, like, I'm assuming, look at this, your YouTube is not receiving enough video. Really, fiber optics. I got a gigabyte a second up and a gigabyte a second down. Okay, well, let's go back to that video. The video is Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, he makes 400,000 drones a month that are sold to Ukraine, and then they put bombs on it to chase young conscripted people around till they blow them up. He's worth just tens of billions of dollars now. But how evil have you got to be to do that? So listen, he's very mocking. He's got two Israelis. This guy here, I really dislike him. And he's tolerable, but just barely. They do produce some good stuff, but they're very biased, pro. Instead of being just a journalist, they're pro-Israel.
My God,
right?
what a problem.
It's a spirit
Listen
in
to him.
dialogue.
My God!
Why are you screaming?
Way, amazing.
You're not in control
Because
of your
you're pressing
emotions.
against me.
So he pushes them away.
What do you think of the sparring match between the U.S. Embassy and Europe over censorship?
No questions.
You're the one who came up with the memo about a spell check for hate. Remember that memo you wrote in an article about 10 years ago?
I think that you should just stop interviewing me.
I know, but you're a censor by nature.
Well, he's
you're the guy who came
interviewing.
up with the whole
I
plan.
think you're being offensive.
Oh, does that mean I should be censored, though?
No,
She was
I didn't say
acknowledging
that. I
his
think you're being
interview.
offensive. I think you should stop.
Well, don't you think you have an
I think
obligation
you-
to
I
talk
think-
to the public?
No, I do not, and I certainly do not have an obligation to talk to you.
You're the one who fired the starter pistol for censorship
I
in the whole
did.
industry.
Wow, amazing that you know this.
Well, I read the article.
You did? What article?
It was either in
I
the Times or
love
the
this.
Post.
How interesting.
You talked about a spell
You're an
check
asshole,
now,
man.
for
what you're
hate.
doing, now what you're doing is you're having fun at my expense.
Well, he knows the two
My
Israelis not going to hurt
my
him.
God, what a problem.
It's a spirit in dialogue.
My God!
Why are you
Should be
screaming?
thrown over to his
Amazing.
steps that
You're
time.
not in control
Because
of your
you're pressing
emotions.
against me.
Is this
It's
a
a
spirit
serial
of
killer,
dialogue?
right?
Is this a spirit of dialogue?
I'm not interested in a dialogue with you.
But that's the
I
entire
am
theme.
not. You are now harassing
Who
me.
do you want to have
And
dialogue with?
harassment is illegal in Europe. Why don't you let me get through?
You want me to go to jail for talking to
No,
you?
I actually would like you to leave me alone.
Well, you won't leave us alone. You're the one
I
who
can assure
started
you
the whole
I-
censorship war.
I can assure you that you're just wrong, and I suggest that you stop.
Well, and
I
as a
think
man,
you
you
should- I
can
think
say
you
that,
should-
but you were the boss of Google who brought in a wave of censorship, particularly targeting conservatives
I am not
and Trump
into-
supporters.
Really? Really? Wow, amazing how guilty I am, according to you. My God. And
What an
you need to
arrogant
stop
prick, eh?
blocking me
Why are you pushing?
because you're pushing
Does,
me.
does he really think
And we have
nobody
it on
wants to
camera.
interview
Does it make you
him?
really
I
angry
am
in real life to have to
angry.
face people?
Facing you? No, not at all.
You seem super triggered.
Super triggered because you won't leave me alone. It's called harassment.
Well, he's trying to kill hundreds of thousands of people a month with his drones so he can make money. And he's got tons of money already. And you know he's putting AI into those drones because he grew up, both of his parents were MIT professors. And he grew up with the city block size computers. He grew up with those people. And he used to program those computers as just a child. He used to do the punch cards, right? So he's seen the entire evolution of that technology, and now he's and it's true what they're saying is that he attacks everybody through censorship, because he's the guy who wrote the program that is currently censoring people since he became the CEO of Google. Okay, hang on. That's kind of important. Now, he's down there making decisions which are going to affect you and your loved ones for the rest of their lives. So you don't have a right to question him. So you're not receiving enough videos, everybody? 95.5 on the poll. Yeah, someone voted no, that's right. Incredible censorship when you consider that I actually have a gigabyte a second upload speeds and I only need 5.6 megabytes to do the YouTube live stream at 1080, right? Hang on. So we're still at that right there on your end. My goodness. Get over to here. Shinzo Abe killer, which should have been a mob of people instead of one. When you consider how many hundreds of millions of people he have made permanently sick with radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland, that he spent a lot of the taxpayers' money promoting. The next one is Bill Gates. I'm going to
Come on, Bill. The theme of the WEF this year is spirit of dialogue. Let's have a conversation, an open dialogue. Can you answer some of these questions?
Was at the World Economic Forum
Mr. Gates,
yesterday.
can I ask you what you think about the United States, the
turn it down a bit,
HHS and the CDC lowering the childhood vaccine schedule? What do you think about that?
Child vaccine schedule. He makes a fortune. He makes more money off vaccines than he ever made, and he's not even a doctor. India wants him for crimes against humanity. There's another country trying to prosecute him for knowing that the shots were going to cause vascular problems, right? Like you're seeing these big obstructions in people's from, you know, kind of morbid. But I follow a lot of the, like John Looney from United Kingdom, and an embalmer. I've collected an absurd amount of those people documentation. We'll touch up on that after, actually, this video. Let's play this video first. He's being grilled about the vaccines. He's surrounded by bodyguards. And again, why is it we see these single individuals that are a curse on humanity, allowed to live out their entire life, never prosecuted, never held accountable? In other countries, the mob would just put him away right quick. If he was in India, they would stone him to death immediately. Not that I'm advocating.
The theme of the WEF this year is spirit of dialogue. Let's have a conversation, an open dialogue. Can you answer some of these questions? Mr. Gates, can I ask you what you think about the United States, the HHS and the CDC lowering the childhood vaccine schedule? What do you think about that? Mr. Gates, what do you think about the HHS lowering the vaccine schedule in the USA? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Mr. Gates, I'm a student from Columbia. I'm building a startup that aims to democratize access to education. Can I just have 10 seconds of your time? I don't share my idea with you.
Mr. Gates, given the complications that came out from the COVID vaccine, do you think that it was actually wrong to push such a thing on the world? No answers?
One of the things he's known for
Mr.
saying
Gates,
is
can you at
always
least
have a
accept now
smile
that it's
on your
public
face.
domain and common knowledge that the COVID vaccine was basically a failure? Can you accept that and at least apologise to the world for getting it wrong? It's okay to get things wrong if you admit you get things wrong when you are wrong. Can you do that? Come on, Bill. The theme of the WEF this year is spirit of dialogue. Let's have a conversation, an open dialogue. Can you answer some of these questions? Okay, how about ignore these questions if there were complications with the COVID vaccine and you got things wrong and people were harmed and died?
Sorry. All right. Thanks so much.
Bill, can you at least answer one of those questions? Well, actually, you're walking in my way. Bill, often they say, you know, we should trust the experts when it comes to vaccination. Yet, how are you an expert? You work in computers, you don't work in medicine, yet you seem to know so much about it. Why can't we answer these?
That's a great...
Bill, are these people telling you what to do because you are losing your mind? You don't look very with it today. Mr. Gates? No.
Had a big smile on his face the whole time.
He's being pushed around. He almost looks like Joe Biden towards the end of his premiership, where he would just walk aimlessly around the place, almost like maybe he's had too many vaccines and it's causing brain damage.
He's not taking vaccine.
You
Neither
saw
is his
people
kids.
going, no, Bill, this way, no.
Okay. So I got a couple of these videos. So we got BlackRock to get through, and we got Canadian Prime Minister to get through on that, and we got Justin Trudeau, the former Canadian monster. So this next one is a doctor.
Now, I'm going to be very honest.
A doctor that I've been following for about 4 years. He put out this video, I think it was yesterday. He's talking about damage from the vaccine. These are experts. None of this is me. This is the experts talking, right? He's talking about they're seeing of several billion people who has severe brain damage from the vaccines and other health issues.
Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. I am no longer optimistic anymore. And the reason is very simple. The reason is because I'm afraid that these RNA vaccines, mod RNA vaccines, whatever you want to call them, have already done their job. And what their job has been, and this is incredible, was not even known to the planners because they didn't realize that what they were doing. But it is what I said years ago, that the vessels throughout the body are going to be attacked from top to toe. This is something that never happens in any disease, okay? Systemic, meaning the brain, the heart, the liver, everything can be attacked, the vessels. And the trouble is that it's turned out to be true. So this systemic vasculitis leads to destruction of brain cells, obviously. And that is what we are now experiencing. We're seeing, I'm afraid to say, billions of people whose brains are not working anymore, not as they should be. They are altered, and they do not have, they don't have the willpower anymore. They don't have the intelligence anymore to move things. And so the only chance we have is to stop this mod RNA crime, because this crime is going to destroy us. The trouble is that they're rolling out this RNA vaccines all over the place, and people don't realize this is being done.
And the problem is your immune systems are compromised from the radiation poisoning from not just 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, not just the pulse event at Fukushima, but all your food and water and air now, and steel, as you know, as we covered quite a bit, is contaminated. So you got BlackRock CEO saying that people don't trust him anymore at the World Economic Forum. And you even got Prime Minister Carney saying the New World Order, which is United Nations, by the way, is the New World Order.
We understand that this rupture calls for more than adaptation. It calls for honesty about the world as it is. We are taking the sign out of the window. We know the old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy. But we believe that from the fracture, we can build something bigger, better, stronger, more just.
Piece of shit. The world order he's talking about is United Nations. And Trump this year has just cut off funding, which is the biggest funder of UN, despite the fact you're talking about 195 countries are funding all these, the World Health Organization, IRPA, UNSCLEAR, the IPRC, International Atomic Energy Agency, all these major UN entities set up to control the planet. They were there pre-Hiroshima and Nagasaki as the League of Nations. 2025 continues as the hottest year on records. The hottest years on records are post-Fukushima, because you kill all the bacteria and the fungus and by proxy the biota in the soil, and that's the material that breaks down the foliage in the litter and the dead insects and the animal feces and everything else. So when you wipe that out, the earth, plants are not sucking up water anymore. The earth is not sucking up water, retaining water, because you don't have the biota, you don't have the fungus and the bacteria, which sustains the roots of all the plants and trees and meadows and everything, but also, right, it serves as a safe haven for the microscopic biota, the millions of microscopic creatures that are breaking down, the cycle of life and recycling it back into nutrients, which is recycled into the species over and over and over. It's a beautiful perpetual machine of life, and so the earth doesn't soak up water anymore. So therefore, it retains heat. You don't have the morning dew perspiring, which is a deterrent to lightning strikes setting off forest fires, for instance, right? So now when you have lightning strikes, everything is tinder dry because post-Fukushima, the ground is not retaining water. So the problem with that is when you have rain, your typical rain, it doesn't get soaked up into the earth, right? It accumulates and turns into a raging flash floods. And post-Fukushima, we're seeing that manifest worldwide. And it's the same thing with the forest fires, because the earth is so tinder hot. The springs are earlier, the fall is much later. The forest fires are more intense because there's nothing there to slow the fire down. So when you get a lightning strike, all this foliage that didn't break down because you wiped out the foundation, the biota, the bacteria, the fungus, which should have broke down that foliage in the litter. And that would have, now it's tinder dry, is still in a bizarre, that is not a part of the system. So it will rise up and float like a Chinese rice paper fire balloon does. It'll float a distance and land again. That's another forest fire because everything is tinder dry. And there's no moistures, there's no morning dews to slow down the movement of this. Kiefer Sutherland arrested after alleged assault in Los Angeles. I don't watch movies myself, right? I know he's been around a long time. Los Angeles Police Department said they were determined 59-year-old Emmy Award-winning Canadian actor entered a ride-hail vehicle of all things. Because you're talking about somebody with an enormous amount of influence and money and monetary. He can literally walk up to any luxury car he sees and ask them for a ride, and they'll drop him off without second thought, right? He doesn't need to use public transportation. It's risky because he's very popular, very well known. And he plays parts where he's like a superhero many times, but when he gets into the real life, he's no longer a superhero. That cycle doesn't work. And he comes from that whole litany, right? His dad, I loved his dad when I was young, Donald Sutherland. He's one of those gumshoe actors that worked very difficult. His son did too, but his son had he grew up in a very privileged environment and then transitioned. Emmy Award-winning Canadian actor, a physically assaulted driver, which is crazy, and made criminal threats, going through hard times, or radiation sickness. The driver did not sustain any injuries that required medical treatment. Best known for bringing universal he's the grandson of former Saskatchewan Premier Tommy Douglas, best known for bringing universal health care to Canada, which is like a multi-billion-dollar a year ripped off in that industry. And he didn't put the checks and balances there to protect the taxpayers from that kind of abuse. My goodness, this guy, Oklo, not a nuclear, you've heard the expression here a few times, not in my backyard. People don't want nuclear dumps and nuclear reactors, so-called, in their backyard. That's one of the industry loves to revert to that pun, so to speak, right? How we doing here? I'm pretty happy we made it this far tonight. It's so cold down here. It's unbelievable. No views. We got 24 votes, though, which is crazy. So over half the people that Google acknowledged came to my video gave me a thumbs up on my poll. Which I can understand being censored. Because we tackle some of the hardest subjects for so long now that they're still hard, though. That's the thing with this topic. None of the subjects are easy to articulate. And you got to go. The preamble sometimes require. The preambles sometimes require. Just bear with me. But, being a celebrity doesn't mean you have freedom anymore. I can see that being an issue. And you're always hounded by paparazzis, for instance, right? I know where they're coming from because I'm harassed by the nuclear industry 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in a real bad way, my name is trash. The industry has trashed my name so bad, I'll never be able to defeat the denigration of my reputation, right? I'm permanently destroyed. But history will eventually show that I was a very honest, very sincere person, trying to do something good, trying to be a good guy. It will always be the most difficult path to take, right? Okay, let's keep it going. Well, let's cover Shinzo Abe, actually, because we're starting to run down our time frame now, right? I gotta just delete everything we've covered, which is an enormous amount, actually. We're always so busy here, aren't we? We always cover an absurd amount. And it seems like there's a lot of stories we won't get to tonight. We won't get to shrimp with a side of cancer for some reason. We're not going to get... That's a great story, but it's complicated. We're not going to get to Russia dumped 19 radioactive ships plus 14 nuclear reactors into the ocean. Idiots. There was 18,000 dumps altogether from the Soviet Union into the Pacific. I'm sorry, into the ocean. into Kyrgyzstan, into the Arctic. There's a bunch of stories. Now, tomorrow night, the idea, this is a really important story. That one story that I just kind of jumped past with the guy from Oklo, it's like almost 100 screen captures for me to get through that friggin' story. The great decoupling, nuclear stock plunge as Microsoft pivots on data center power strategy. Is Microsoft walking away from the so-called small modular reactor? That's the story I'm looking for. Gunman jailed for life in the killing of Japan's ex-prime minister shithead Abe. Well, you know, I wasn't sad. I wasn't sad to see Shinzo Abe dead. Look what he done to us. In extreme increases in mortality, death rates might give the creeps to some people. It's okay for him to kill everybody, but we're supposed to have sympathy for a serial killer? I don't think so. You got, you know, thyroid tumors for children went from 1 in a million to 358,000 out of a million. Right, but the media is going to paint the prime minister as if he had a few redeeming qualities. Clearly, he didn't. 50 atoms a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in your vital organ. And how would you avoid that after what Shinzo Abe, right, flooded everybody's country with food from a nuclear wasteland? You know, the Nodokan, it came out, the certain half of Japan had covered nuclear waste, which is the breadbasket for North America for rice, for instance. Those 60 and older and Asia should be prepared to die at the Fukushima plant because your power plant broke down. People 60 and older who worked all their life should be prepared to die. Well, Sutherland's only 59, so he was safe. Japan's National Cancer Center said the number of patients for cancer rose by 865,000 extra cancer victims by 2012. Well, I wonder what the catalyst could possibly be. The presiding judge, Tanaka, described Abe's death as despicable and extremely malicious. Yeah, but what about all the people that he killed? When do they get acknowledgement? Shinzo Abe, more than anybody I know, deserved to die. This was we covered the live show. I got a video of his execution. I'm going to play that because it makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside every time I sees it. Nothing personal, Shinzo, you piece of shit. I just got to check the volume before I touch anything. So this, I'm going to get it away so you can enjoy it. This is that serial killer getting a death penalty. The best thing that ever happened to humanity in Japan was this right there, huh? Bless his heart, boy. He built his own weapon. Guy's a freaking hero. There he goes, drop dead, you piece of shit. He poisoned hundreds of millions of people. Shinzo Abe murdered our planet with radioactive food. Congenital heart disease operations rose 14% past what it was already, which was an extra 14,200 children out of 100,000 needed open heart surgery for complex congenital heart disease to avoid congenital malformations and stuff. Inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer. TEPCO, because the government let them do this, send us people who don't mind dying. Do you think he was talking about Shinzo Abe? Do you think he volunteered to go there? You think his kids volunteered to go there? Tokyo vice governor, I mean, they picked up 30 million one-ton bags of radioactive fallout in farmlands and the communities that they wanted to trick and deceive and coerce the naive and ignorant people to go back into the nuclear wasteland. And the worst news again is that the number of foreign visitors in Japan is almost 43 million in 2025, folks. We didn't think they were going to hit 30 million a few years ago, but they hit that easy. And they're expecting to climb to 60 million a year to go into the nuclear wasteland and eat the radioactive food. That's what they're up to. They're out to murder everybody they can. And people are paying them. They're making an enormous amount of money each year doing it. It was up 15% from last year. Just absurdness. And the statistics are South Korea increased 7.3% to 9.46 million people went to a nuclear wasteland called Japan, ate radioactive food, drank radioactive water, breathed radioactive air, and now will have to liquidate their assets in the future instead of passing them on to their children so they can get another couple of years. Followed by China at 10 million, up 30%, and a number which is supposed to be retracting, right? Because of the bans. And the number from Taiwan, scumbag nuclear industry in all of these countries are despicable. The only reason that these numbers are happening is because the nuclear industries in those countries are promoting it to try to make their nuclear industry look investable to the naive and gullible investors. And the United States is up to about 3.3 million people from the United States. That's 3.3 million people will need medical intervention in their own country because they were tricked and deceived and coerced into going into a nuclear wasteland. That is frightening. Preliminary figures also show that the foreign visitors spent about 60 billion US dollars, I'm assuming, right? Otherwise, it would have been depicted as euros or sterlings or pounds or whatever. In Japan last year marked a record high, surpassing the figure in the previous year and the year before and the year before. You know, pre-Fukushima, I think tourists was around 18 billion people or something, or 18 million people. 18 billion. And so they're doing this mostly to trick people to going into the nuclear wasteland and use those statistics to quantify that as safe for you and your loved ones to go there. Oh, they went there and they never got sick. You're not doing no long-term studies on the visitors. You're not following them back to their countries and checking on any discrepancies in their health. You sadistic monsters that are doing this. Japan fast food chain now is using AI for drive-through orders. Of course, we know all this is going to happen. And they're going to roll it out when they get the kinks out of it in a couple of hours to 600 branches worldwide. And they want all of it handled by AI as soon as possible. Former South Korean Prime Minister Han got 23 years in prison, folks. And they're calling it insurrection. And they're even alluding to it in the story. And so Yoon, of course, you know how much I despise Yoon, the guy who he helped. 23 years. Wow, 23 years. 23 years, folks. To 23 years in prison for playing a key role in an insurrection related to former President Yoon declaration of martial law. And Yoon had claimed that there was no meltdown at Fukushima. That's how he ended up being. And the very next day, after becoming the Prime Minister of South Korea, we covered it, right? He went to a nuclear power plant in South Korea, right, and invited a bunch of people out. Well, his lackeys did, his Salians did. And a bunch of people, employees, clearly not experts in nuclear, they wouldn't work at a nuclear disease factory, where the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation and neutrons are bombarding all the cement and steel of the entire site. Why would you want to work in that shithole for it? The court said Han neglected his duty and responsibility, thinking the insurrection might succeed. Wow. And so he chose to take part. And 23 years is holy shit. That's a long time. He's not young. He's usually by the time you become the prime minister of these countries, you're fairly elderly. And so it's pretty holy smoke stuff. It's the first time a court has ruled that the martial law declaration constitutes an insurrection. And he's the first one to be sentenced. He was indicted without arrest and was taken into custody after court proceedings. And Yoon faces a ruling on February 19 on the charge of masterminding the insurrection. He was a former federal prosecutor in South Korea, right? Who we've covered long before he became the president. Special counsel in South Korea demands death sentence for ex-President Yoon. Special counsel in South Korea demanded the death sentence. Right, they were appointed because they were bipartisan, so to speak. They weren't choosing any political affiliates as a favoritism, right? They're supposed to be independent. And they're calling for what he done, the damage he caused to the reputation. So South Korea is a really interesting country if you can get the nuclear industry equation out. And way back, quite a long time ago, I watched protests, which is unusual, by the way, in South Korea. The protests, you got to realize in South Korea, the average person there is at least a 4th-degree black belt in Taekwondo. Taekwondo is one of the most aggressive martial arts on the planet, and I was trained for many, many years by it in Taekwondo. But it's an art, right? You know, I trained. Our whole family was training, right, for many, many years. And so, you know, we were heavily involved in this stuff. And there's this whole ideology, there's really cool stuff that goes along with it. It's a way of thinking. So, like, if I'm in the aisle of a supermarket, I don't have a right to block off that aisle. I'm aware that I don't have a right to block off of that aisle, because in that particular martial arts, you're trained not to interfere in other people's lives. You don't know where they're going, if they're in a rush to get medication for their child or elderly, or et cetera, et cetera. You know, and I'll tell you a personal story about that. My younger brother recently lost his wife, and he wanted her to pass away at his home. And so what he done was, in her late stages, he was going to the pharmacy to get the medication so that she wasn't, in too much discomfort, right? And then when the final day came, they couldn't get their medication. There was a whole lot of issues. He had to personally go leave his wife at the house. Now, lucky for him, her mom and her sisters came, right, for that final 2 days. And she was a good friend of mine. And we it's a long story. I'm not going to go into that detail. It's not necessary. But anyway, there was big delays for him to get the prescription necessary for those terminal moments that could bring it, because she was in a lot of pain. And he got home with 20 minutes to spare, right? And she was so far gone he couldn't utilize that. So our last few hours were just pure misery. Can't even remember now why I brought that up. Special counsel in South Korea demands the death sentence for ex-President Yoon. The team requested the sentence at the Seoul Central District Court on Tuesday. It said the defendant posed a grave threat to people's political freedoms and destroyed a constitutional order, a liberal democracy that he did not reflect on his actions. No, he was 100% aware of what he was doing. But just to finish off that story, I was talking to my brother a few minutes after she had passed, and I disrespect the people that killed her in the hospitals with the radiation, right? So much that I almost went out there. I was furious. I was looking for revenge. And it took me quite a few days for it calmed down, eh? I was really, really... I knew what, I was aware of what was happening. It was too late when I found out to do anything about it. We did get her on DCA. Her blood was perfect when she died, but she died of severe tumors everywhere. It was too late. It said the defendant, but it did change her blood, which was it's a remarkable story, that facet of it, right? If she had got it a week earlier, 2 weeks earlier, we might have been able to save her. Probably, well, not might have. We would have been able to save her, extend her life with comfort, not with misery, right? Let me read that again. The team requested the sentence at the death penalty at South Korea's Central District Court on Tuesday. It said the defendant, former Prime Minister, who he got arrested for invoking martial law, posed a grave threat to people's freedoms, political freedoms, and destroyed the constitutional order of liberal democracy. Right? He destroyed. Okay, so let's go back to that story. So there was this story. It was on TV, and protesters were using 4-foot bamboos, and they were fighting the police. And the police had instead of shields and batons and heavy equipment and everything else, they had 4-foot bamboos. So you had running fights of police. Now, for police, in order to be a police officer in South Korea, you got to be at least a 4th-degree black belt, probably a 5th-degree black belt, which is like a 4th-degree black belt in South Korea is considered a perfect student. Whereas in North America, we consider a 4th-degree black belt like an insane, scary individual, right? But in South Korea, it's pretty normal. So I was watching this fascinating, blip, and they were whacking each other with bamboos, and you can tell that that was very painful, man. You can see people just like their arms go limp when they run away, and other protesters would come in and protect them and swing on the police. Police weren't wearing shields. They weren't wearing elbow pads, nothing. And the reason was they would lose respect with the common people. If they showed up with water cannons, if they showed up with tear gas, if they showed up, with riot control equipment, they feared they would lose the respect of the communities and the people in the communities, and then by proxy the country. And so they fought fire with the exact same fire, so to speak, which I thought was crazy stuff, because when you see the damage from what a bamboo can do to you, like, holy shit, that is crazy stuff. Anyway, Prime Minister Yoon has compromised the integrity of the political elite, and they might execute him. But the people that imported the radioactive food into South Korea, which we know they sent over 6 million pounds back because it was too radioactive, but how much got through? It could have been 100 times that, right? And they would die of terrible illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. The former president is facing a charge because he declared martial law, sent troops to the National Assembly itself, attempted to detain lawmakers without warrants in December 2024. We covered it as it happened. He took the measures as he criticized opposition lawmakers who disagreed with his budget plan. And there was riots in the streets over the budget plan, and he was determined to push it through because he was a power-hungry prick, and we called him that when he was a prosecutor for the federal prosecutor for. But then he ran politically and said that Fukushima never happened. There was no releases whatsoever, and so he had went into try to produce a nuclear renaissance, and then he got ousted, arrested, and that was the end of the nuclear so-called renaissance. But it wasn't a real renaissance. It was just shows you how influential and powerful and almighty the nuclear industry, and these people are the worst humans imaginable. They're the most cowardly people you'll ever come across. They've never been challenged by a single nuclear expert, never called in and said, let's get it on, Dana, let's go, man. I'm calling you out. Because I'll fucking destroy them. And the reason I'll destroy them is because they can't tell the truth. I can. Yoon said the martial law was a peaceful message to the people and that he instructed military to avoid clashes with the civilians. This is absurd to suggest he said that when the opposite happened blatantly and it was acknowledged. South Korean media said the court is expected to rule on Yoon's case as early as next month, folks. And we're at the 21st. Well, now it's the 22nd right at this time. Yellow Cake Baby. So the same artist, musician, filmmaker that we made that song is also is also the behind the next song. I'm going to put a link in the description. I already got it queued up for you. Just got to get back up. So we still got a full show that we can't get to. I knew that was going to happen tonight because the file that I imported today was like 500 clicks. And, my back is aching, but it's not as bad as a couple of days ago, thank goodness, or last night certainly. Yeah, DCA. They banned it in Canada after I started promoting it. And we were buying it and giving it to cancer victims. We were paying for it. And they were seeing remarkable results, but they wouldn't give up the radiation therapy because they were lulled into complacency by the hospital. Well, Dana, the hospital uses it on everybody. It has to be okay. I say, yeah, but nobody survives it. And the ones who do most likely didn't even have cancer in the first place. The 3%, right? And the only reason you use chemo is because you won't take radiation. But eventually, because the chemo is going to kill them too, which is chemicals, they'll either switch to radiation or chemo radiation, right? All the dogs died from the plutonium. And the plumes contain all the other isotopes that I didn't even come close to touching tonight. Six-pointer today in Volcano Islands, eh? Wow. All right, so just the show tonight. Let me see what I got down here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10, 11, 12, 15. Just bear with me. I really classical music. The same artist has recently posted Nuclear Poland classical music video or audio. It's really good. We're going to play. Here it goes. Bing. Yeah, Yellow Cake Mule is perfect song for tonight's show, wasn't it? I just posted a link to the Nuclear Overton window. We might lose power tonight. I forgot to change the light over my head. I hope that wasn't a distraction for anybody. It's a little bit of flickering. Remember, all the whales are emaciated. There's a high probability I'm going to do that show tomorrow night. I don't know for sure if I do. And that's my intention. They're such difficult shows for me, eh? And I've done so many of them. I got a playlist with over 50 in it. That's not all of them by any shape or forms. So if you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe. Give us a thumbs down. All that good fun stuff. It's called, don't forget to poll. Does 750,000 radioactive loads on the Canadian roads each year, irradiating millions of drivers each year, prove the nuclear is the very definition of evil, that there is nothing more evil than what they're doing? I guarantee you that is 100% proof. And we'll see everybody on the next show. We got to close here with Nuclear Overton window. That'll show up in the live stream comments 12, 13 hours or so. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on the very next episode, which hopefully is tomorrow night. We'll see you on that one. Take care.
Those who decide told us there was no alternative. They said the demand was fixed. They said reliability needs scale, and scale won't wait. They said firm power, constant power. Said the future needs it now. They called it a renaissance. Said the decision was already made. They said delay was danger. They said review was over. This is how the nuclear Overton window began to narrow. Those who decide talked about solutions, talked about schedules, but not about keeping what remains when the generation ends. They talked about storage for now, they talked about fixes ahead. They said the process was technical, not ours. They didn't talk about the horizon, they didn't name who stays accountable. The nuclear Overton window never held a long term. Asking slowed things down, then caution cost too much. Consent became friction, so it was pushed aside. The nuclear Overton window moved again from from open debate to settled position. Rules were shortened, reviews rushed, governance turned into something to move through. The window didn't shatter, the push continues. Here stands the nuclear Overton window, not cracked, not broken, held open on purpose. Not a future to keep reopening, not a decision to keep revisiting. This must be decided, this must be carried, this must not be passed forward without an end in sight. Remember this moment, the nuclear Overton window must close. Not paused, not deferred, entered into practice with consent. This should not remain unresolved. This is what we must remember. This is what we must remember.